diplomat on the Chinese side. Here's what the New York Times said about his discussions with Blinken when Blinken was there. Quote, Mr. Blinken heard some harsh words over his 2-day visit. On Monday morning, Mr. Wang delivered a blunt message during a 3-hour session at a guest house, blaming Washington for all of the recent tensions. Mr. Wang said Washington should cooperate with Beijing instead of, quote, hyping the China threat theory, close quote, according to a Chinese government printout. He said that Washington must lift sanctions on China and stop suppressing the country's technological development. He accused the United States of recklessly interfering in China's internal affairs on such issues as Taiwan, which the United States, the New York Times says, supplies with weapons. And then it goes on. He really gave it to Blinken, not just about Taiwan, but about what's going on in Xinjiang and in the western part of China, what people here are always told about as the so-called Uyghur genocide, about Hong Kong, about Tibet. The Chinese government can, as you're making the point, I think so clearly, is sort of basically telling the U.S., you can't do this to us. We're not going to allow it. You can't interfere and expect that there won't be repercussions on our side. And whenever the Chinese talk like that, the U.S. media says the Chinese government's tone has changed so dramatically, and they're so bold and assertive and aggressive, perhaps hyper-aggressive, like wolf warrior diplomacy. And when you compare that to the way Biden or earlier Blinken and Sullivan were talking about China, all China is saying, the so-called hyper-aggressive diplomatic stance is, stop trying to destroy us. Stop meddling in our internal affairs. Stop trying to break away, as the U.S. is trying to do with Taiwan, a part of our country. And Taiwan has been recognized by the United States since 1972. Taiwan has been recognized as a part of China. So what the media in the U.S. characterizes as hyper-aggressive diplomacy on the part of China is simply China asserting that it's not going to be walked over and stomped over by the dominant military power in the world. And that's becomes China's crime. So according to the U.S. media, the only way China could really please the United States when the United States does interfere in China, does threaten China, does sanction China, is for the Chinese to be humble and silent. In other words, that the Chinese should act like they're still semi-colonially enslaved people, precisely the thing that Chinese people made a revolution to end. Anyway, your thoughts.
I want you all to know that we are fighting the fake news. It's fake, phony, fake.